Hey, good evening. Welcome back to my little gardening show. I wanted to take you along as I'm getting ready to inspect my seed trays here, my flats. Kind of check on the progress of the seedlings, see if anything's sprouted, and then what to do after that. We started 3 trays, 3 flats of seeds this past Saturday. It is now Wednesday, so usually within 2 to 3 days things sprout. I could see a little bit when I was walking in. I haven't raised the lights yet, but I want to take you along as I raise the lights. We're going to check these out and then go from there. All right, so there they are. Looks like not all of the Swiss chard has sprouted. They're a little slower. The seed coat's a little thicker on those things. But where we have sprouted, we've got a couple pretty healthy ones, so we can kind of spread things out. So the next step is we're going to keep the lids off now that they've sprouted, and I need to go through and prune out the ones that we don't want to keep. Now, in areas where there's a lot of good ones or something, I'll probably pry them all out, separate them out, and then use them as spares to populate any holes, like maybe this one here where they didn't come up so well. But I need to do that. It's important that I get these pruned out pretty soon, because right now with them sprouting and everything, they're starting to compete for nutrients and water and stuff like that, and I haven't fertilized them yet or anything like that. They have access to water. Technically they're going to be okay for a little bit until they get their true leaves appear. Their seed leaves that are kind of built in, the first things that sprout. But once the true leaves begin, that's when I really need to start feeding them, because at that point they've exhausted the nutrients that were in the seed itself, and they need something, otherwise they're going to gas out and not make it. So now's a perfect time to separate these out, prune them out, pick the healthiest ones to go with. I'll leave the lids off. I'll start feeding them, and then they should do fairly well. And then within a couple weeks, we will start putting them outside and begin the hardening off process, get them acclimated to the temperatures, get them acclimated to sunlight, give them time to adjust to outdoor conditions, the wind, things like that, a little bit of breeze. Get them to the point where they'll have a good chance once we get them out in the garden, where the conditions are going to be even more harsh, because there's going to be like straight line winds. There's going to be direct sunlight all day long. There's going to be a lot of different things that it's going to be challenging for them if they don't get a good start, if they're not really healthy and ready for that. So that's really the goal, is getting them prepared, getting them ready for the outdoors, so that they'll successfully take root out there and then ultimately produce a crop. It's fun growing them and all that, but ultimately we're growing these for food, right? We're not growing it just for the fun of it, to have something out in the yard and we don't do anything with it other than just watch it grow and then die, or go to seed or something like that. Really the goal of everything that we're going to be putting out in the garden is that ultimately it's going to be fruitful. It's going to get to the point where we can harvest it for food and get kind of a return on that. That's really the practical goal of all that. There is the intangibles of this kind of or the aesthetic appeal of going out there and seeing everything nice and neat and pretty and everything growing and all of that. It is relaxing and there is benefit there. But so anyway, I'm going to take you along as let's go ahead and thin these out a little bit. Alright, so there's a couple different ways you can go about thinning these out. I could dig out the whole clump, take a look at the rootstock, see what's going on underneath, and then pick the healthiest one and potted in there. I could attempt to pull out the ones that I don't want in there. So with the first method, the downside of that is that it takes a lot longer. You're having to replant everything. The second method, where you just pull out what you don't want, the downside there is that sometimes they're too far established or the roots are entangled, and you end up pulling it all out anyway, or you damage the one that you want to keep. The other method is to get you a pair of, kind of precision snips like this. Where you can get in there and be precise at what you snip out. Or if you got long fingernails, you could go in there and probably get away with just pinching off what you don't want there. But this should work, as far as going in there and cleaning out what we don't want to remain. And then we'll just let everything grow, right? So I'm going to go through, I'm going to use our little handheld trimmers here, snips, and we're going to go through and clean these up a bit. Now, sometimes it's difficult to do that because everything is going pretty good. And, there's been years that I've done the longer method where, I take them all out and then I try to save them and basically, spread them out and I have more trays than what I really need, right? So this is just something you got to do. You got to go through there and prune these out. I mean, the whole idea of seeding this as much as we did was to make sure we had at least something that would come up, and then from there prune them out. So we're going to go ahead and prune them out. Now this one, what I'll probably do is dig out one of these bunches that are doing really good, because the one on the end is not doing good at all. And I may just do that on this bunch here. That seems to be the one that struggled the most. So for that, in that case, we will just rip them out. And then what I'll go ahead and do, we'll kind of work ahead. And this one looks pretty good. Just going to take my little homemade soil tool here and pull out that whole clump and then push everything else back down. This is pretty healthy, and there's already a root all the way down like that. We're just going to separate these out on the bench here and try to be careful not to bend the stems. You see that? That's pretty healthy. Let's check the rest of these out. Sometimes it's difficult to separate them because they're just so intertwined. Let's see if we can compare these. Oh, I lost one. Now you see, I don't know if you can see that root ball, but there's 3 there. This one in the middle is the healthiest, because not only does it have the foliage and the straight stem, but it's got the really long rootstock. This one here is about just as healthy, and maybe its roots are tangled a little bit around this this piece of debris there. This one looks healthy, but it's actually not as good as these other 2 because it doesn't have the root. It doesn't have the root that these 2 have, right? So we're going to go with those 2 and lay that one aside. Now what I try to do is hold it by the seed leaves so I don't crush or damage the stem at all. The seed leaf, you can damage it and it'll be okay because there's another set of leaves that are coming behind this. Not that we want to damage it or anything. Need to get my dibber. Alright, so we're going to drill a little hole there. I'm going to drop that in, maybe a little deeper. And we can kind of carefully push the mix around it. And we can go to our other hole, make a spot there. Take our other one here. And drop that in. Kind of do the same thing there. So we just quickly remove the other three. There's the one that's left. Alright, so we've got everything pruned out for the most part. Everything's looking pretty good. The only ones I didn't touch yet are the Swiss chard. I want to give them another day or two before I prune those out. They're a little slower to sprout. But overall looking pretty good. So again, why did we do that? Why did we terminate all those plants that were in there? Well, to eliminate competition, we wanted to go with the strongest ones or the ones that looked the most promising based on what I could see above ground. I couldn't really see what was going on below with the roots because we didn't want to dig them all out. That would have taken like a lot longer. But based on what I could see, picked the ones that had the thickest, straightest stems and the ones that had kind of the best looking foliage in terms of the seed leaves, and left those in place, prune the others out. Again, I'll eliminate competition, so the resources that I'm giving them, the water, the nutrients, the light from the grow lights, everything, all of that's focused on the one individual plant in that little area. You know, the plants are in the trays here. So what's next? What do we do next? Well, the next thing is that we keep the tops off. We don't want to put the lids back on because we don't want these seedlings to dampen off. Sometimes they can get a little fungus at the base and they'll just dampen off because things are too moist there at the surface level. So we're going to remove the covers. We're going to give them a day on the grow mat. I might lower the temp just a little bit because I don't know how quickly these are going to dry out with the lids being off, and we could kick it down a notch because I mean it was at 80 degrees. That's borderline almost a little too warm for these, but you know, so far so good. So I'm going to lower the temp on that. We're going to keep an eye on the moisture level. I'll probably have to water these at least every other day, I'm thinking. We're also going to be applying the Mittleider weekly feed, the constant feed. It's a diluted version of it, and it's basically for seedlings so that they have the nutrients that they need. I may add, you know, sprinkle in some worm castings between the seedlings so when I top water, some of that stuff's washing in, and they've got a little bit of food source there. Other than keeping the lids off and watering them regularly and feeding them regularly, the other thing I'm going to do is lower the grow lights. They need to be within about an inch of the seedlings, as low as I can get them without the lights actually being on them. Otherwise, it could you know, negatively affect the foliage there. But I want the lights as close as I can get them because one thing that can happen with these is as they grow, they're reaching for the light, and because these grow lights aren't as powerful as the sun, they're going to have a tendency of getting leggy, we'll call it. If the lights are too far above, they're going to try to grow too fast, reaching the light, and they're going to get leggy and fall over. They're not going to have strong stems. So I want to keep the lights low so that they're getting the maximum artificial light I can give them to encourage them so they're not having to reach for it and they don't get leggy. The other thing I might do is hook up an oscillating fan If not that, I'll be sure to run my hand gently over them a couple times, each day. Like when I come down here, run my hand over them. That stimulates growth, will strengthen the stems, help them so that they get stronger. Just something about that, and that's basically one of the purposes of the wind, when you plant stuff in the garden, is that the plants are strengthened by, trees are strengthened by that as they're growing, because they're having to resist, and it stimulates growth and hardens them up. So we're going to be doing all those things for the next probably 4 weeks or so. And then my goal is to then transition them outside, maybe on the back deck, maybe to the greenhouse. But transition them outside and start the hardening off process there, get them acclimated to the temperatures, the conditions, the wind, the sunlight, all those things. And then hopefully within about 6 weeks altogether, these will be ready for the garden. We can plant them out and kind of go from there. So there you have it. That's basically seed starting 101 or 102. I guess we started them last week in the last video. This is kind of a continuation of that. One final thing that I'm going to try to do this year is do some succession planting. So probably in a couple weeks, I'll start another batch of plants. It'll either be in a couple weeks, or maybe what I'll do is after the warm weather crops are out, like in May, start another batch of seedlings that will come behind these plants, so that as I'm harvesting these plants in like June, July, I've got another harvest that's coming behind it, maybe in August, and then possibly a third crop. If I start some in July or August for a fall harvest. We'll see how it all goes, and there's a lot of the things that are going on in our lives right now, and things that could change and whatever. So it's just all providing, contingent on whether we've got the time to do all that. But anyway, if you get any questions, feel free to post. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you next time. Happy gardening. Bye.